G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with a clip for Gary at Inmendham, and the topic of this one is bullshit content. Interesting idea, isn't it, Gary? What is your bullshit content? In something that you've taught yourself, right? So, EFIL-ism. Life said backwards. That's your great contribution to the planet, isn't it? You invented life backwards-ism. David Benatar invented antinatalism, and Schopenhauer first decided that life isn't worth living. So your contribution to planet Earth is life backwards-ism, aka EFIL-ism. What is the bullshit content of that? Okay, you can tell me in another clip. My bullshit content, Gary, is 1.42%. Yep, that's when I teach myself to do something, you know, like from start to finish, like design and make a propeller for your aeroplane and then go for a fly in the aeroplane powered by the propeller, right? The reason I keep this propeller over the door of my hut is because it was the first flight propeller I ever worked on. I designed it, I bought the wood, I laminated it. That's what those black lines are. It's a formalin or formaldehyde based glue called resorcinol. It's boil proof. I glued it together and I carved away everything that looked wrong, and when I started, before I ordered the wood, I said it's going to make 140 pounds of thrust at 4,000 RPM, 3,650 feet above sea level, because that's what I thought it would do. Okay, that is the prediction. This is the experiment. And there is a picture of me flying the aeroplane. That being the aeroplane. But showing you those pictures, that doesn't say much about me bullshit content, does it? The bullshit content gets measured with the calculation and the experiment. I calculated 140 pound of thrust, it produced 138. So 98.57% accurate, 1.42% bullshit. That's my personal bullshit content when taking on a complicated project that I have to teach myself. You invented EFIL-ism. What's your bullshit content? Is your bullshit content with EFIL-ism, Gary, anywhere near your bullshit content with your theory that it'd be a real clever idea to put a windmill on a motor car in order to save energy? Bearing in mind that you have to burn fuel in the engine to push the motor car through the air to generate the slipstream to feed to your windmill. Bearing in mind that a fella called Betz, B-E-T-Z, go and Google Betz's law on the available power in the wind. Mr. Betz, Professor Betz probably, said that you can only ever get 59.3% of the energy in the airstream to come out of your windmill, and that's if you build an absolutely theoretically perfect windmill that nobody's ever done. People feel that they've done really fucking well if they get a 20% efficient windmill, and 30% efficient, that's just, you know, beyond imagining. Alright, so let's imagine that you've got a 30% efficient windmill sitting in the grill of your car. So you're going to reclaim 30% of the energy that you have fed to it in the slipstream, but you've burnt petrol to make that slipstream. So it's a complete no-brainer. It is infantile to even suggest it. Right? That's the bullshit content of your idea? To save fuel because you don't want to have a solar panel on the roof of the car. You admit that it's no great trick to produce a solar panel and mount it on a motor car so that it doesn't appreciably worsen the car's aerodynamics. You admit that it is possible to improve the aerodynamics of the car by putting a wing on top of the car and positioning the downflow from the wing, the downwash, so that it improves the car's aerodynamics. You admit that cars are really bad at making electricity. You admit that cars use 5 horsepower to push the air out of the way at 50 kilometres an hour in town, and you admit that they use 5 times that amount of energy, or they square the amount of energy if you double the speed. So 50 k's 5 horsepower, 100 k's 5 5s are 25, 25 horsepower. You admit that for me to get 1 horsepower of electricity out of the alternator, I have to put 8 horsepower into the belt because I've got a 2-to-1 step-up belt drive. You admit that if I had a more modern car with a more modern gearbox with an overdrive cog, I would have a 3-to-1 step up on the larger alternator, and I would have to put 12 horsepower into the belt to get 1 horsepower of electricity out. You admit that the battery sulfates and that the static onboard systems suck on the battery while the car's parked. You accept that my car requires 3.68 amp hours per day. You haven't argued with the fact that the car uses 207 mils of fuel per amp hour, so 3.68 amp hours per day is 760 mils per day, is 5.3 litres a week. You've merely had an emotional gut reaction that, oh, how can it be? There's all of these incredibly smart engineers have spent years working on cars and they haven't noticed that there's a bloody great big fat obvious mistake. You can't cope with the idea that somebody who lives in a lawn locker under a gum tree and feeds kangaroos for the fun of it is capable of coming up with an idea that the grand American engineering motorised daydream hasn't already figured out. Well, I'm sorry, Gary, but my bullshit content is considerably lower than yours. Give you another example. Your whole theory that it'll be a good idea to generate electricity when you're going downhill. Has it occurred to you that already happens? If you've got a battery that needs charging and you start rolling your car down the hill and you take your foot off the accelerator and the engine commences to work as an air compressor, and it's the wheels driving the gearbox which turns the engine, and the engine has a belt which turns the alternator, and the alternator is connected to the flatness of the battery, then yes, you are doing electrical regenerative braking. It's just you're using a piston engine as a link in the drivetrain between the back wheels or the front wheels and the alternator. And you claim to have been a mechanic before you took up wannabe philosophy? Infantile. Windmills on the car. Infantile. Your bullshit content is like phenomenal, mate. It's possibly fair to say that whereas I have a 98.57% accuracy rate and a 1.42% bullshit content, you have got a 1.42% accuracy rate and a 98.57% bullshit content. Mr. Life Backwards-ism. In fact, Gary, I would go so far as to say that in the vernacular of the Australian society, you don't know whether the hole in your ass was punched, bored or cut with a fucking cold chisel. But other than that, you're an interesting rhetorician, and I can relate to anybody who's worked out that there's an awful lot of fucking arseholes on the planet, and it's a clever idea to go away and not hang around them. So I can relate to you living in the forest, and I can relate to your low opinion of an awful lot of the people on the planet. But you're not a mechanical design engineer's arsehole, mate. And I don't think you're much of a philosopher either. Bear that in mind. Ciao.